Hello everyone, welcome to this property market update for November 22 for Port Douglas, right? We're closing off the end of the 2022 year, but let's take a look back at the last 3 months to see what's been going on in this marketplace, right? So if you are potentially looking to buy in the near future or sell, this update is going to give you some really good clarity as to what's going on in the marketplace. We're going to deep dive into some different sets of data points, look at the supply side, look at the demand side, and really paint a picture as to what's going on, guys. So I'm super excited. Stick around. There's going to be a ton of value in this market update for November 2022. So again, guys, this market update is proudly brought to you by Tropical Life Buyers Agency. My name is Troy Simbasini. I am the owner of the business. My role there is head of research and lead buyers agent. So as a buyers agency, we represent the buying side of the transaction, and we are generally helping struggling home buyers in the area, investors that need help, interstate buyers that need help, and those that are just generally geographically challenged. So if you are finding it hard to navigate the particular marketplace in and around tropical North Queensland, Far North Queensland, North Queensland, then feel free to reach out. Happy to have a chat. You can visit us on our socials, give us a call on that number, or click on our website to find out more about who we are and what we do. So as part of this market update today, we're going to be looking at various data points on the supply side and on the demand side, both from a sales, buyer and rental point of view. And that's really going to start to really paint a picture as to sort of what's been going on of late in and around the Port Douglas property market. So the median price change, we're going to be looking at the stock levels and the listing volumes. We're going to be looking at what the days on market is doing on the demand side, what the overall absorption / consumption rate is for properties that are coming onto the market. We're going to then look at what the vacancy rate's telling us in relation to the rental side, and if there's been any changes in the median rents. Then we're going to poke our head over to future supply as well to sort of see if future supply is going to be coming onto the marketplace to potentially take some heat out of what's already happening in and around the area. And we're going to finish off with some key takeaways, summary, and some high-level trends, guys. So stick around. There's going to be a ton of value here, guys. Stick around. So if we firstly started off by looking at what's been happening with the median price in and around Port Douglas, and we can see here that the median price in Port Douglas as of November 2022 is currently $1,160,000, and it's actually up from $1,096,000 in July, right? So you can see there that's the best part of what I'd probably say close to a $60,000 increase since July, right? So the median house price share has essentially grown by 5.8% in the last 4 months, right? So this really tells us a story that the market over the last 3 months has continued to claw away, right? And this is probably already looking like the market is still in strong demand, right? There's still a lot of heat in the marketplace, and this is despite consecutive interest rate rises. Obviously, a change in sentiment around the property market, doom and gloom in the media. We can still see here from a median price point of view that Port Douglas is well and truly kicking along. We've also got to remember in and around the Port Douglas area, there is a small sample size, right? So there's not a lot of properties that come onto the market in the Port Douglas area itself, right? There's a lot of other suburbs on the periphery of Port Douglas that aren't necessarily captured as part of this median house price, but overall we can see that what's transacting in Port Douglas itself that has a Port Douglas postcode or has a Port Douglas alignment to where we're capturing the data from, the median house price is continuing to bubble away and grow. And yeah, this is despite all the negative sentiment in the marketplace, consecutive interest rate rises, and yeah, we can certainly see that the market is moving along. We don't have a crystal ball. I always say this, we don't have a crystal ball. I don't really know where the market will go in the next 3 months, and this is what we want to analyze today, right? Look at some of the fundamentals of what's happening in here, look at some of the data, and hopefully they'll tell us a story around what's happening on the supply side, what's happening on the demand side. Then we can maybe figure out what those trends look like. But over the last 4 months, we've seen a 5.8 increase in the median house price for Port Douglas. So we've obviously seen there that over the last 4 months that median house price has grown, right? And if we don't poke our head now over to the supply side, maybe that could be the potential reason why we've seen, this ongoing median house price growth in and around Port Douglas. So what the stock levels are telling us on the supply side is that they're currently sitting at 0.5%, which means that there are approximately only 5 houses currently listed for sale in Port Douglas during November, and it's just actually under the average of 0.7. So virtually, I'd probably say every month rolling in terms of the average there of 0.7, we probably have the best part of around 5 to 7 houses coming onto the marketplace in and around Port Douglas each and every month, right? And Port Douglas, given its size, given its desirability, to have that, I suppose, low levels of stock, probably to me really reflects why this median house price has been growing right over the last 4 months. Because if you look at it, 5 houses per month, all it takes is for 5 houses to come online, and then you have 10 or 15 bidders bidding over that one property. Obviously they're going to be paying overs, trying to secure the property against all the other bidders, so they're going to be paying over or probably what it's worth. Not many properties probably will be discounting in the area, and that's going to be continuing to drive up that median house price. But yeah, we can sort of see here the trend levels of the stock in the area are super low, right? Super low. And just from my own analysis and diagnosis of what's been happening on the stock side, obviously Port Douglas over the last 24 months has had a lot of interest from interstate buyers. So a lot of people have fast-tracked their retirement. A lot of people have become digital nomads and moved into the area, right? So they end up buying a lot of stock in the area over the last 24 months. And a lot of these people are now just sitting on their properties, right? And there's not been, from what I've gathered, a lot of new supply come onto the marketplace. So those that are wanting to sell or might be in a position to sell probably aren't selling at all, because from a supply point of view, in terms of rentals and existing stock, there's just not enough there. There's just nothing for them to go into, so they choose to hang on to their property. So we can see here that stock levels will continue to probably trend low, because there's just no other alternative if someone wanted to sell their property, or potentially on the rental side, and then potentially from a new home point of view, there's just not enough in the area, so people would just sit on their properties. And then that's sort of my own opinion as to sort of what I've sort of seen in and around the area on the ground. So continuing on the supply side, right, and looking at the inventory levels, and we can sort of see here that inventory levels continue to show a downward trend, right, with less than 1 month's worth of inventory available in November 2022. So we sort of have this rolling average of 5 to 7 properties that are coming onto the market as new listings at any given month, right? And then I'd probably say there'd be an absorption rate associated with how much what percent those properties that come into the marketplace clear. But sometimes some properties don't sell in the first month that they go online, so that they roll on into the next month or roll on to the next month. So they create this rolling inventory, right, of 1 month. And we can sort of see here that, based on the velocity of sales in and around Port Douglas, it currently has around 1 month's worth of supply based on the existing demand, right? And we can sort of see here that that trend, certainly over the last 24 months, has just been going down and down and down, and supply is just becoming tighter and tighter and tighter, and now it's sort of sitting under 1 month, probably more like 3 weeks really. So basically, based on the velocity of sales and the turnover of stock, of the existing properties that are currently on the market on different real estate agencies' books, if the market were to go into redundancy tomorrow, and I always say this, these properties will be cleared out in roughly 3 weeks. So the market from a supply point of view looks to be extremely tight here, guys. And we've seen that median house price grow over the last 4 months, and we've seen obviously those listing volumes super low, and now we're just seeing the aggregate level of inventory that's sitting on the marketplace at any given time now less than a month of supply. So that's really painting a picture there, guys, of what's happening on the supply side, and it's probably the main reason why we've continued to see a surge in that median house price. But from a supply side point of view, guys, it is looking very, very grim. So we've now understood that the supply side is looking very, very grim, right? Those listing volumes extremely low, and that rolling inventory levels extremely low. So now we want to poke our head over and look at what the demand side is telling us, and days on market is a really good metric to determine, what's happening on the demand side. And I always say that days on market is just essentially a data point that tells us for every property that comes online, right? It takes on average this amount of days to sell, right? And when we know that it takes an X amount of days, we can then benchmark that to determine if the market is heated or not, and if properties are moving quickly, right? So we can sort of see here that days on market sit at 87, and it's actually the highest it's been since August after a long downward trend over the last 24 months. So we can sort of see that trend line there moving very, very low, and for the best part of 2021 all the way up to early 2022, right? That days on market has been really, really low. And for 87 days, right, we have to remember that if a property takes around 87 days to sell, roughly around the standard contract period is around 30 to 35 days. So if we looked at this 85-day figure, it's probably telling us on average that a property that comes online in and around the Port Douglas market would probably take around a month to sell right now. That's what this is telling us, that properties probably aren't selling right away. There'd probably be obviously exceptions to the rule here, where there'd be an absolute banger come online, whether it's a house right on the beach, or a house with views, or a house with all the bells and whistles, or just a house that ticks all the boxes for someone that's actively looking. That might move very quickly, but we can see here from a days on market point of view that it sits around sort of 87 days. So that means that houses on average are now taking roughly around a month to sell, right? But we also have to remember that Port Douglas, in and around Port Douglas and Port Douglas itself, has a lot of established stock that generally sits on the market for a long period of time, particularly those properties that are in the very, very high price bracket. I'm talking about north of $3 million, north of $2 million. Properties like that, you generally have a very low buyer market or market depth there, so they take a lot longer to sell. So we've seen cases where these properties in and around Port Douglas have been sitting on the market for 90 days or longer, right? So if they eventually then sell after 90 days or so, if a property's been sitting on the market for 90 days or more, and all of a sudden this $4 million house sells, boom, that's actually then going to skew this days on market metric, right? So on average it might be sitting at around 40 days on average, let's say, that, and then all of a sudden you have this property that sells that was been on the market for 120 days, and then that's going to drag up that average days on market, right, as an aggregate, because this data metric here, or this 120 day sale, is actually going to pull up that days on market. So probably not 87 days, probably not even an accurate reflection on the average days on market in the area for your standard properties, right, that are in high demand versus the ones that take a lot longer to sell. So probably, in my opinion, the days on market probably just for your standard affordable homes in and around Port Douglas, probably more or less probably sits around 50 days, I'd say. And this 87 days has been skewed by one or two sales that have been on the property market for a very long time, and it's dragged up that average days on market. But from a demand side point of view, if the demand sits at around 50 days on market versus 87, I'd probably say the market there is very healthy, and the demand side is pretty strong, but it's not overly heated. So I generally say that in terms of auction clearance rates in and around Far North Queensland, we don't look too much into it. Auction clearance rates are a good data metric to really tell us what's going on in the capital cities, right? A lot of property experts and a lot of businesses are using that as a key metric to really temp check what's going on in the capital cities. But in the regions, not so much. But in and around Port Douglas, funny enough, it actually has healthy levels of auctions, right? So there's actually a lot of auctions that come on to the marketplace, particularly over the last 12 months. And I don't want to read too much into the auction clearance rate to really sort of paint a picture as to what's going on in the demand side, but I think it's worthwhile covering off here, right? So we can see here that auction clearance rates sit at 50% for the existing auctions that have come online, and it's still evident, I suppose, that the auction market and Port Douglas and F&Q as a whole, I'd probably say, is still very hit and miss. So, well, there's obviously a lot of boutique properties, a lot of high-end properties as well. So it's also really hard to sort of put a finger on what these properties might be worth. So it's more easier for agents to generally then go to the marketplace, right, and sell these properties via auction. And there's also, because Port Douglas is a big tourism hub, right, there's a lot of opportunity for developers to also come in and buy existing residential dwellings, particularly those with a large land footprint, and knock those dwelling downs and build boutique hotels or apartments. So generally a lot of agents, if they see a property that has that potential, would choose to auction the property rather than go to market and sell it through your standard portals. So yeah, from an auction clearance rate guys point of view, 50% though, like for a small regional town, to have, on average, we can sort of see the trend line there. There's at the lowest from 2021, we probably had around 2 auctions, and now it's sort of, over the 2022 period, there's been more than 4 auctions a month in and around Port Douglas, and that's really, really good for a small little town like Port Douglas to have that many auctions, and then to have the best part of 50% of those clearing just goes to probably show that the demand is strong in the area to still have these auction clearance rates sitting at around 50%. But it is a very small sample size, but it is also a very small market. So I suppose the sample size relative to the market size as a whole, I think it's in good balance there. But overall, we can sort of see that demand is healthy. I suppose for those that might have had difficulty in trying to buy a property in the area, maybe pop up at one of these auctions, right? And have a look at what's going to auction. And if there is a 50% clearance rate at these auctions, then that means that 50% of the properties that do go to auction aren't selling, right? So there might be a potential opportunity there if you're a buyer to jag property, right, where there is a lot less competition than the online portals, right? So that could be a potential opportunity for a buyer to go there and jag a deal. That's certainly something that I'd be doing. So to really summarize what the demand looks like as a whole, it's the absorption rate really, really encapsulates the demand and what that looks like as a whole. And we can sort of see here that overall in Port Douglas, it is experiencing a healthy absorption rate of 66% from August to November. And although this is actually slightly down from 85% from May to July 2022. And if we actually broke down those numbers and what they look like during that period, we can sort of see here that there's been 21 listings from August to November, and there's been a total of 14 sales, giving us that absorption rate of 66%. And we've seen it sort of taper off there from 85% now down to 66%. I'd probably say, like I do with a few other updates, is that we've actually seen this as a natural trend, basically from the September to November period, where a lot of buyers potentially put the queue on the rack and they sort of go, oh, I'm now sort of going to wait until the new year. I'm going to worry about Christmas. I'm going to worry about the festive holidays, kids finishing school, so I'm not necessarily going to concentrate on buying. So there's been a natural tapering off there of that absorption rate. But when you sort of see it drop from 85 to 66, that could be an easy throwaway to go, the market is certainly cooling here, and the market might be starting to go backwards, and we might start to see a retraction in the median house price. But I've actually seen, after a number of market updates now of looking at Cairns and Far North Queensland, that from that basically September to November period, we've actually seen a natural tapering off there of that absorption rate. But overall, like, for the marketplace to continue to absorb 66% of all the properties that go to market, it still shows me that there is good balance there between supply and demand. Particularly demand is very, very healthy, and supply, from a supply point of view, that looks extremely low. But I'd probably say, yeah, don't read too much into the data at 66% right now. I'd probably say I'll be doing another market update at around March next year, 2023. And if that absorption rate continues to drop from 66, let's say down to 55, then that's when we know actually the demand side is really starting to fall off a cliff here, guys. But yeah, for now, we're going to see a natural tapering off of Christmas, and that's a trend that I've seen. But yeah, next year we'll really sort of see if the demand is starting to fall off a cliff. But so far, things are looking pretty healthy in and around Port Douglas. So we poke our head over to the rental side, particularly those that are looking to invest or potentially rent in the area. We're going to get a good sort of indication as to sort of what's been going on in and around this particular market. So basically, we can sort of see here that the median rent continues to follow the rising trend, and it's now actually sitting at $616 per week for houses in Port Douglas, right? And this is actually up $24 or 4% since August 2022. Wow, right? So basically over the course of 4 months, the rent has basically rised $24. So it's on a rapid run here, guys. And if we probably look at, I'm going to get to that in a sec, what the vacancy rates look like, there's probably a great correlation between as to why this median rent continues to surge along over the last 4 months, because there might be extremely low levels of supply. But we can sort of see here, from a median rent point of view, yeah, it's certainly moving moving at a very rapid pace, and you can get a really good yield there potentially if you're property investing. Probably say on a $500,000-$600,000 purchase, that looks between sort of a 4 to 5% rental yield there, based on that $616 per week. So if you're an investor, this looks like a pretty good market, right? And if you're also an investor, if we're starting to see, let's say, Port Douglas and the median house price for Port Douglas, we're starting to see that, not median house price, median rent price sit at $616 per week for houses, then what might happen in and around the area, right? People might be priced out of renting in, let's say, Port Douglas, and might decide to rent in Mossman or Kuya Beach or Wonga Beach, in and around the area, Craiglee, for example. And then we might start to see a surge in those rents as well, right? Because people are priced out of living in Port Douglas in particular. And Port Douglas has a major hospitality market, right? So you got a lot of hospitality workers that need accommodation, that live in there, chefs, hoteliers, people, admin staff for a lot of these big boutique hotels and apartments. They need places to live, right? And we can actually probably, I've been reading in and around Port Douglas, and what the council's saying is that they just can't accommodate for a lot of those workers, right? So there's so much pressure now in the rental market. Is so heated, and I think supply is super low. And we're going to get to that in a second, and that's just continuing to just make this median rental price just continue to move in a ridiculous fashion, going up $24 in the last 4 months. Crazy stuff. So we've just seen that median rent, grow $24 in 4 months, and now looking at the vacancy rates, we can see why that's certainly been the case. So I'd probably say overall, Port Douglas is in a crisis here, right? They're in a massive crisis, and we can see here that vacancy rates continue their downward trend, now sitting at 0.3%, with only three vacancies currently available for rent in the month of October. And we can sort of see here the trend basically since 2021, right? On average, each month there's been less than 5 rental properties come on to the market in a place where there's so much demand, right? Particularly from the hospitality sector for rental properties, to then only have only 3 vacancies currently on the marketplace, and then have this super low trend of under 5 for long periods of time. You can actually then start to see why owners are just jacking up their rents, because the market is just in a position where they can jack up their rents because the supply is super low and people can rent out their properties for a premium, right? And we're starting to see the council look for intervention measures. So what I've read in 2 weeks ago is that the Port Douglas Council are now looking to potentially tackle some of the Airbnb properties that are in the marketplace that sit in residential catchments, and potentially put in some bylaws to restrict those from being Airbnb properties, right? So just to then put them back on the rental market to accommodate for these extreme low levels of houses, and allow for potential people to rent those properties, as opposed to them being short stay and not getting maximum and highest best use, given the climate, right? Given the vacancy rate conditions in the area. So yeah, the Port Douglas Council are certainly aware of what's going on here. You can see from these vacancy rates that the place is certainly in a crisis, and if this continues to remain very, very low, then I can't really see these rental prices potentially slowing down anytime soon. So yeah, we've definitely seen now with the sales side in terms of stock, and then the rental side in terms of stock, just how extremely low both things are, right? The sales side as well as the rental side, and the extreme amounts of pressure that it's putting on the marketplace, right? Median house price continues to surge along, and then the median rents are continuing to surge along. So the only way for that potentially to start to cool, right, or to retract, is for new supply to come to the marketplace to just take a bit of heat out of that, and that new supply will then be able to sort of cater for that demand base, and then we might just start to see potential market here cooling. However, if the supply side continues to remain rather low, then we're probably going to see the status quo continue to play out. And the best way to look at the supply side is to actually look at the building approvals pipeline in the area, and we can sort of see here that for the Port Douglas area, a total of $7 million worth of building approvals have been in place for the 2022 to 2023 financial year. It's actually, if you looked at it, we've got another 6 months left roughly before the 2022 to 2023 financial year is up. But if you looked at it that in comparison to previous years, in terms of a half year spend to date or year to date spend, it actually is trending pretty low. But I wouldn't read too much into the financial year, the current financial year approvals. I'd probably want to look back, the last 2 to 3 years where approvals have taken place, because we generally know that with building approvals, right, with new supply, you get an approval as a developer, then you go through then building approval processes, you get a mobilized finance, go through construction. So generally after you get approvals, stock doesn't necessarily come onto the marketplace for about 1 to 3 years after the initial approvals. So what I really like about this graph is that there's been a lot of approvals happened particularly around that 2019 period, 2021 period, and then even the best part of last year to the last financial year. So those levels of approvals are really high. Most of it sort of on average sit at around that $40 million worth of approval. So we might start to see a lot of that new supply come into the pipeline, in the next sort of, 6 to 12 months potentially, to take off some of that pressure we're seeing, in terms of housing stock for sale, and then housing stock for rentals as well. But from a building, approvals point of view and future supply, I'd probably say it is looking pretty good, in sort of the next 12 to 24 months. But if these levels of approval, particularly for this financial year, remain relatively low, and then leading into the next financial year, if we're starting to see these levels similar to, let's say, 2018 to 29 levels in terms of spend, we probably might see history potentially repeat itself in 2025, 2027, right, in the medium term, where these approvals that are happening in real time now just aren't enough to cater for that future demand in the midterm. So yeah, we'll see what happens, guys, but that gives us an idea of what's happening in terms of future going forward in Port Douglas. So yeah, guys, we've looked at the marketplace, we've dissected it, we've analyzed it, looked at various data points to really sort of tell us a picture there, and it could be a lot to swallow for those that don't necessarily understand how these different data points work, but I try to explain it as simply as possible, and I try to break it down as easy as possible for consumption, as I am aware that not everyone deep dives into data and gets down and dirty into the data like myself. But I hope that's been really helpful, guys. But I suppose if I were to sort of make it a bit more easier and created some summary as to sort of what the data has told me, and create some key takeaways here. I've got a couple here that I'd like to run through, right? And the first one is around this median house price. So as I said, as part of the briefing, is that despite the headwinds, right, despite the ongoing narrative of the property market around doom and gloom, it's going to crash, it's retracting, we've actually seen quite the opposite happen in and around Port Douglas. The median house price has continued to surge on, and this is despite all of those headwinds. And if this median house price is going to continue to surge on, probably two things need to happen here. The high end of the market, right, will need to continue to sell higher than the current median house price, right? And the only way it can do that, right, if demand is strong and if stock levels are extremely low. So if stock levels remain low, demand remain high, you will always sort of be in a situation in the short term going forward where a property that comes on the marketplace for $1 million, there'll be 5 or 6 bidders bidding for that property, and they'll all eventually start to bid against each other and to try and secure it. Rather than that property selling for $1.5 million, it might sell for $1.6 million. So it continues to drag up the average of that median house price, and that's only going to be the case if we have that extremely low level of supply and that ongoing demand. So we may not even see a price drop there, guys, and that sort of leads into my second point there, where I said if inventory levels and listing volumes continue to drop, we won't see prices drop because supply is still very low relative to demand. So that days on market metric, we looked at that, and that looks healthy, from a demand point of view. But if you are looking at this particular data point, just be careful, because that days on market metric can be skewed, right, by listings that have been sitting online for a long period of time, right? So, it may look like the market is cooling, or that might be telling us a story that, hey, the days on market has jumped from 40 days to 80 days. However, that has been dragged up or pulled up by a property that might have been sitting on the marketplace for 100 days or more, right? And if you have the average sitting at 40, and then this property sells for 100, and then there's 2 or 3 of those older listings, that's going to drag up that median, and it's probably not really an accurate reflection on the marketplace in real time. But yeah, if you are looking at that as a metric, just go through and look at some of the historical sales, and if you see properties that have been on the market for a long period of time, you know that, hey, that skewed that particular data point there. All right, so the next one is from an auction point of view. It's still very hit and miss in Port Douglas, and that's probably reflective of Far North Queensland in general. However, for those that are active in the marketplace right now and don't want to be, surrounded by a lot of competition, or don't want to be bidding against multiple people, we're finding that, that auction clearance rate is relatively low. So that means that a lot of properties are being passed in at these auctions. So there's not a whole bunch of demand there chewing up these potential properties at auction. So they might present really good buying opportunity for potential buyers to show your face at an auction if the property is a fit, and throw your name in the hat and see how you go. So definitely for those that are active, maybe consider an auction. From an absorption rate point of view, it's extremely healthy. So I suppose for those that are even looking to sell, there's a very high percentage there that will be a property moving, roughly 66%. And we know that that's slightly down from, the mid-year period where it was sitting really, really high. So we need to actually watch this as a metric going forward as well. If this absorption rate continues to drop, then we probably know that demand has really started to really fall away here, and properties are not selling as highly or as consistently as what they previously have, right? And we know there's a great correlation between the absorption rate and the discounting, right? People might start to discount their properties. So someone might go to market with a property for $1 million and it's just not selling for $1 million, so they might have to discount it to 9.5, 9.4, and that's when we're going to maybe start to see that median house price start to attract as these properties sell for less than what they're probably listing for, or getting more than the median house price to drag up that median. So yeah, this is something to watch going forward. I will be doing another market update early next year around March, when we'll have some historical data to really look at what that absorption rate looks like. But for the most part, yeah, it's sitting pretty good, and it's probably a natural thing towards the end of the year where that that absorption rate tapers off a little bit, as a lot of people put the queue on the rack for Christmas and don't worry about buying. And there's also probably a lot of people right now sitting on the sidelines that have cash, that have a pre-approval in place, that are just sort of waiting to sort of see what's happening with the marketplace. So they're probably sitting on the sideline and sort of dragging down that absorption rate also. So that's something to be mindful of as well. So we're seeing also now on the rental side that vacancy rates, extremely low. Port Douglas is in a crisis. It's just absolutely plummeted to an all-time low, right? And it will probably remain the same, particularly from a rental price point of view, if there is no new supply, right? So we may see, rents continue to soar in the short term if there are no short-term interventions to alleviate some of that pressure. So yeah, Port Douglas is in a crisis there, guys. And from a rental point of view, particularly if you're investing, you can get some really attractive yields in and around the area, right? But yeah, it is in a crisis, and it's probably something to keep an eye on going forward. And we really need to find ways to speed up that supply side to try and alleviate some of that pressure. And I know, just on that last point, from a supply point of view, that the Port Douglas Shire Council has been fast tracking some of their approvals, particularly around the residential subdivisions in and around the area. So they really want to fast track those, bring those online as soon as possible to alleviate some of that pressure. So I think around Craiglee, around Kuya Beach, a lot of those new stages of those residential subdivisions have been fast tracked, right? So we might see those as a product type come into the marketplace, house and land packages very soon. However, what I'm seeing in the area, probably feel like a bit of a downer here, but Kansas is in the same position, right? Vacancy rates are extremely low, and we know that majority of the builders in and around Cairns, they also work in the wider region. And what I'm seeing on the ground is that there are a lot of builders tied up and up to their gills in work in and around Cairns because it's under the same problem. So then places like Port Douglas take a bit longer for things to get built, as a lot of the construction companies are tied up with work locally in Cairns. So we might see that supply, despite council looking for ways to fast track it, we might not see a house actually be built for quite some time, or houses come online relatively slow because there's just not enough of that skilled labor in terms of construction working in the area, guys. So yeah, that's some of my key takeaways for this November market update for Port Douglas. If you do have any questions in relation to this, you want to unpack it more, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any questions. Leave a comment in the comment sections. I'll try and get around to answering all of those when I get a chance. And yeah, guys, I'll be doing another one of these in and around March. So fingers crossed, we're going to start to see, particularly the rental market, start to cool in and around the area. All right, guys, thank you. Again, guys, this has been proudly brought to you by Tropical Life Buyers Agency. My name is Troy Simbassini. I am the head of research and lead buyers agent for the team, right? And we are a buyers agency that works exclusively for property buyers, representing them on the buying side of the transaction. We help generally struggling home buyers in and around the area, investors, interstate buyers, and those that are just generally challenged or need help navigating this marketplace. So if you need help, or you feel as though you need help, we just want to have a general chat to maybe see what we offer, to see if we might be able to add value if you are struggling. If you can find us on Facebook, visit our website, or give us a call on that number. Thanks, guys, and bye for now.